Welcome to Sydney Harbour. So this is the beautiful Harbour Bridge. We have the beautiful Opera House over there. Magnificent, isn't it? So, Peter Zeihan, if you were out there, I doubt Peter Zeihan would listen to my thoughts on geopolitics, but if you are a Peter Zeihan fan, I would urge you to maybe tweet this video at him, send it to him. I would love a response from Peter Zeihan, or even just to let Peter Zeihan know that there are some free-thinking people out there that actually understand how the world works. And I think there's also one more person out there, Geopop. I know you were promoting Peter Zeihan for a long time there, and Peter Zeihan tweeted you out and you're getting a lot of clicks. I would say that you're part of the problem as well. So for you guys that don't know who Peter Zeihan, he recently made the big time, massively made the big time. He was on the Joe Rogan podcast. Joe Rogan tried to push back, but his limited knowledge on geopolitics in general, he was at a massive disadvantage. And when Peter Zeihan talks, he talks with such confidence. And you guys know that confidence comes from it comes from the idea of, I'm not calling Peter Zeihan a con man, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that someone who's overconfident, the word con man came from confidence man. That's where it came from, just so you guys know that. But he was so confident in all of his beliefs on the Joe Rogan podcast, there was no chance for Joe to even push back. Joe really doesn't know that much about geopolitics in general anyway. I watched that podcast because it was such a powerful podcast for Peter Zeihan to get on there. And for you guys at home that don't really know much about Peter Zeihan, I don't think that he has any formal education that would help him to become a geopolitical expert. He did come from a company by the name of Stratforth, I believe it was, with George Friedman. George Friedman, he knows his stuff. He's a geopolitical expert, and he's quite an honest guy, generally honest guy. Not everyone's 100% honest. There's a bit of propaganda everywhere in geopolitics, but George Friedman is an expert. And apparently, I don't know, but I've heard that they butted heads quite often. George Friedman knows his stuff, and I've learned so much from George Friedman. Peter Zeihan, on the other hand, not so much. I would argue that Peter Zeihan's more a... have you heard of Thomas Malthus? You can search Thomas Malthus. This is old school population and demographics and shortages of food theories. It's called Malthusianism. I would say that Peter Zeihan is really just a Malthusianist, if that's even a word. So he was promoted by a whole bunch of people, like Geopop. And then if you search Geopop, there's Geo Now, there's Geo this, there's Geo that. All of these branches. And the system, the elites that control Google, started promoting these guys regardless of how valuable their thoughts were, because they were promoting Peter Zeihan. This is kind of how it worked. And his influence grew. There was a war in Ukraine, and somehow Peter Zeihan took credit for predicting the war, which everybody else on planet Earth or in the intelligence agencies or every other professional on planet Earth was predicting the exact same thing, yet somehow Peter Zeihan took credit for the whole prediction. Now, Joe Rogan generally likes to search out the truth, but if he's not an expert and he's getting bad information, whoever told him to get Peter Zeihan on was giving him misinformation, and he should have went to the antithesis of Peter Zeihan. There's two guys that I would love to see debate, which is Peter Zeihan versus John Mearsheimer. As some of you guys are aware, I see John Mearsheimer as a legend. He's a legend in geopolitics. This guy has been more accurate than any other expert on planet Earth. And he's a professor at Chicago University. He goes and debates people. He goes to think tanks. Whereas Peter Zeihan gives you some data that seems to be mostly manipulated. He tells you 100% certain, with 100% certainty of all of his thoughts. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't debate people. He gives you data that could or could not be manipulated because you don't know what that data is and where it's coming from. And on top of that, he doesn't take kindly to anyone disagreeing with him. On the other hand, you got John Mearsheimer that openly debates people publicly, multiple experts in the field, and John Mearsheimer quite often wants to get to the truth, not to prove that he's right, which is what a proper geopolitical expert should be trying to do. Recently, a lot of John Mearsheimer has come under a lot of heat, and Peter Zeihan has leaped to the front of the queue in the geopolitical ranks. Now, when Peter Zeihan landed on the Joe Rogan podcast and made himself legitimately famous, he made a lot of false statements. Statements that he couldn't prove because they're literally just predictions on the future that no one would know. He's come under a lot of heat from a lot of the people in the Bitcoin community. He's come under a lot of heat from them because he said that Bitcoin is going to collapse and go to zero. But the part that I would like to challenge Peter Zeihan on is here, 7 minutes in, is Mexico. Now, there's an idea out there that Mexico is going to be the next China. It's going to be where all the factories are going, and Peter Zeihan is doing 100 or more public speaking events all around the world, convincing big business to invest in Mexico and pull all their factories out of Asia and China, of course, and put it into Mexico. A lot of things have been happening in Mexico that lead me to believe that the Mexicans are losing their freedoms, and they're becoming kind of economic slaves to the United States. Now, the country that likes freedom and likes to spread democracy doesn't seem to be spreading much democracy in Mexico. If you look closely, there's a lot of news around cartels. What is a cartel? Is it Mexican gangs or is it Mexican businesses? Are they really committing crimes, or is it just made up crimes because the United States wants to pretty much decapitate the leadership in Mexico and install their own leaders and literally enslave the entire Mexican people? What is really going on in Mexico? Maybe you guys can leave me a comment and let me know what you think is going on in Mexico. Now, Peter Zeihan's made these predictions that the factory's going to be built, Mexico's going to get rich, it's going to be really good for Mexicans, when in fact all of the factories, all of the pollution, all of the negative CO2 and all of the bad things that happen when you create an entire country full of factories and cheap labor, that's all going to Mexico now. And it seems to be going there at the end of an American gun barrel. And it seems to be these people aren't getting paid well, and the United States is creating a slave class in Mexico. Now let's just say that Peter Zeihan and all of his predictions and what he thinks is going to happen is going to happen. Here's an alternate reality that I would like to pitch. What if South America doesn't like that? What if the Mexican people are not very happy with the deal they're getting dealt? What if China and other countries start trading more with South American countries like Brazil, BRICS? What about Argentina? What about other countries like Chile? What about Venezuelan oil? What if these countries all start to revolt against the Monroe Doctrine? You guys know the Monroe Doctrine, which is that the United States controls South America and they're never allowed to get rich or build their own militaries to protect themselves. What if millions of South Americans decide to work together to push back against the American empire, and while the rest of the world is collapsing around us, Europe is collapsing, we all know that. What if a lot of the trade routes around the world starts collapsing? What if a lot of these countries in South America, they get cut off from a lot of those juicy yuan in China, and they're not able to export as much to China, they're not allowed to buy enough from China, they're not allowed, and they start getting hurt all simultaneously across the board, and the United States isn't able to fill the void. Keep in mind, China has more trading partners than the United States at the moment. China's keeping its stuff together more than the United States. The United States seems like it's on the verge of a civil war. Some of the clown world insanity that's coming out of the United States at the moment is off the Richter scale. And in Australia, we've been hit with mass African immigration, which I don't think many Australians are very happy with. Crime rate in Queensland has literally quadrupled since African immigration and Black American immigration. We're having refugees from America already in Australia. Come on, people. What if the Monroe Doctrine becomes obsolete, and instead of a few Mexicans that don't have the ability to speak up against the government and the powers that be within Mexico, because the United States has all their guns pointed at them, what if millions of South Americans mobilize north? What if? I'm just asking you guys, what if? This is just a what if moment. Every country in South America knows what the Monroe Doctrine is. They're aware that their children have been brainwashed since primary schools to believe that the American empire was good for them. They've been brainwashed in their universities. What if the South Americans mobilize? I'm just saying, this has happened throughout history. What if the American empire at its weakest point pisses off the wrong people on their doorstep, and Donald Trump saying he wants to build a wall? That is exactly what the Chinese did 300 years ago. They built a wall. They isolated themselves. They started taking opium and became became decadent. All of these things are happening in the United States right now. The difference is the United States is in a more dangerous region of the world, I would argue. Building that wall south to keep the Mexicans out, as Donald Trump tried to do. What if millions of Venezuelans, Colombians, Brazilians, Argentinians mobilized north to push back against the oppressive American empire? What if? Peter Zeihan, I'd like your answer to this question. Peter Zeihan, if you're out there, I know you don't like debating intelligent people, and I know you'll never reply to someone or debate someone like myself. And you definitely would shit yourself if you had to debate John Mearsheimer, because he would kick your ass. Because John Mearsheimer is a legitimate intellectual genius, expert in geopolitics, and Peter Zeihan is a total fucking fraud. And Joe Rogan, if you're out there, you just spread misinformation, buddy. I know you like to get to the truth, You need to get John Mearsheimer on there, not Peter Zeihan. So for you guys at home, I'll see you guys in the next video.